Are we live and ready?
Here now.
This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon. Welcome. I'd like to call to order the June meeting of the Anderson County Charter Commission. I'd like to ask Annette Pruitt if she'd call the roll.
Okay, Stonecipher,
Present.
Smallridge,
Present.
Present.
Dr. Stanley,
Present.
Emmert, Steve Emmert,
Can't hardly hear her, Ben.
Present.
Mark, Lee. Steve,
Here. Mead here. I can barely hear you.
Seven present.
7 present?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. At this time, we'll have our prayer and followed by the pledge led by Dr. Smallridge. Almighty and everlasting God, we ask you for wisdom, guidance, and civility as we go about conducting the business of the Charter Commission. These things we ask in thy name and for thy sake. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Okay, join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
How's Gracie done in all this?
She's doing fine. Yeah, she's working at Mount Lake Marina this summer, so.
Can you hear me?
Thank you. At this time, the appearance of citizens, have any joined the meeting to speak? All right, the next item on the agenda is approval of May minutes. Everyone have a copy of the minutes, read them? Any corrections or objections to the minutes?
Yeah, Steve Meader, it's kind of a question. On the appearance of citizens, it then states no citizens called in to join the meeting. What is the definition of citizen? I think that would be anyone that's not a charter commission member or part of the technical team that's running the meeting. For instance, if the mayor spoke, and it seems to me that she did have some comments, maybe I'm mixing this up in the meeting, but if there's anybody else, I think we should list anybody else that joins the meeting. Even if they don't ask to talk, if they've identified themselves in the meeting. And particularly if they do speak during the meeting, I think it needs to be part of the record of that meeting. So in the minutes where it says appearance of citizens, no citizens called to join the meeting, if there was anybody other than the commissioners and the technical staff that run the equipment, I would think that should have been mentioned there, or just appearance of citizens, no citizens asked to make comments during the meeting or something like that. Just know that no citizens called to join the meeting. I'm not sure if that's really accurate.
I agree.
Any other comments?
Yes, sir.
concerning
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
This is Steve Emmert. It says I was absent at the last meeting on the minutes, but I was there at the last meeting.
okay, good. When the roll was called, Steve, it didn't answer. But that's great. It's hard to say.
Remember when I had to text my vote in?
Okay,
This is David Stanley again. How can we tell if there are any citizens at the meeting now? Is there some way to tell?
Right now, I have two people, there's caller 2 and caller 3 that are not identified in the room. Everyone else is identified. I do not know who caller 2 and caller 3. If caller 2 and caller 3 would like to identify themselves, please speak up.
now, at this time, we've asked for the minutes. The approval of the minutes, and then we'll get to the citizens if we need to. So what's the pleasure of the commission concerning the minutes of the last meeting?
Move to approve.
Have a motion for approval of the minutes. Second,
A second, if I didn't make the initial one, with the two corrections noted, Steve Emmert was present, and that no citizens called to make statements in the meeting, or however it has to be said for that to be accurate. The technical team knows how many people were listening in.
with that addition, was that Mark Alderson that made the motion?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Any other suggestions or corrections? Annette, would you please call the roll? For the vote?
Stonecipher,
Aye.
Smallridge,
Aye.
Allridge,
Aye.
turn it on, then turn it back off. Alderson,
What do you,
Stanley,
I can call a roll for it.
Stanley?
She needs to probably come up here. I mean, I don't care to do it, or Jerry can do it.
I'm not hearing it.
It might be, go ahead and mute that. Come up here, I'll move. That's probably not the best spot.
not getting off.
You want to come up here and I'll sit down? Yeah. Well, I thought come up here and you're next to the speaker. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Still actually on, it's not completely muted.
Nothing quite like being in the same room with everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we'll start this all over. Stonecipher,
Aye.
Aldridge,
Yes.
Alderson,
Aye.
Stanley, Dr. Stanley.
Oh, as amended, I approve.
Okay. Emmert,
Aye.
Isbell,
Yes.
White, Mead.
Yes.
All approved. 8.
Okay, thank you. Next, we get to the proposals, and at this point, I've had requests, I think, has been made to maybe have additions to the agenda. And I'd like to hear if there's anybody that has things that they'd like to add to the agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Jerry White, I would like to add the possibility of the county commissioners being elected in staggering terms, 8 at 1 year and 8 another year to, I'd like to talk about that possibility. Thank you.
Okay, you're presenting that as a proposal?
I'm presenting that as a, something to talk about for a few minutes to see how everybody feels about that.
Yeah, Steve Mead here. Actually, I think that would be kind of a good idea, but that would have to be, how we would do that would have to be detailed in any charter, along with the long list of other things that I mentioned. I think that would give a little bit more continuity than what we've had in the past. There was a county here in the last election that I think something like 75% of the commissioners changed over in the same election. And they had some problems with continuity because 75% of their commission had never been on commission before.
Hey, I have that down. And we talked about that back in 17, I think, as a possibility too. Anything else to add to the agenda? Okay. Then we'll start with the first one on the agenda is a proposal and timeline to complete the charter submitted by Commissioner Stanley. Are you still with us, Commissioner Stanley? Dr. Stanley, you still with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? I'm sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear
Yeah.
you, Dave.
Okay. I just wanted to say, I think that we will have to meet more frequently in order to meet the timeline of August 22nd. So if we're going to meet that timeline, I suggest we go by that schedule I submitted. Otherwise, of course, we did vote only to meet once a month. I understand that.
Chairman, may I speak?
Yes.
Yes, don't we have to have a public notice in the paper, a 2-week notice for each meeting?
I don't know if it's 2 weeks or 10 days or what the day limit is, but I know
Even
it's,
at 10 even at 10 days, these dates are not going to work. Each one of these meetings, they're 7 days apart on some of them, 3 days apart on the last, of course, the deadline for the term on November 2020.
well, I think,
Would you reconsider possibly meeting every 2 weeks?
you know, we had a motion on that at the last meeting
Yes, sir.
on the number of meetings. And that's right. And that could possibly come up again. I understand that. But, and I know you got a timeline here, but you also had a proposal.
I understand that. I'll withdraw that suggestion for the timeline.
What about your proposal, Dr. Stanley?
I again was trying to see if we could meet our deadline for the next election. And I thought if we've already got everything the way we want it, except for just adding the option for a charter government, that might allow us to complete our task. I may be wrong. We might need a lawyer that is more familiar with charter government to answer that question.
Well, are you wanting to submit that as, are you wanting to make a motion?
Yes, sir, I do make a motion. We add that to the present information on our government now, and perhaps that would be enough to submit as a charter option.
Is there a second? I hear no second. But I would like to say that I think everyone possibly has read that, and that there's a good possibility we could come back to that motion, or to Dr. Stanley's motion later. Commissioner Meade, you asked to speak?
Yeah, there was an amendment to the charter. How does that, are we going to be voting on that separately? My big concern I put in my input is that the other two charters in Tennessee, Knox County and Shelby County, are over 33 pages long, and it took them 8 or 10 years to finally get them approved by the state. It was because it didn't include all the things that are required. The operation of every single department has to be included. even a small department has to be included in the charter. The entire county government has to be there. Their charters are around 35 pages long, and that's double columns, small print. Having the one that was proposed by Dr. Stanley, I understand what he was trying to do, but the state is very clear, and the statutes are clear. Every single part of government has to be described in the charter of government, even if it's referring back to the normal constitutional process that we're running under now. Even if it refers back to the TCA, that's okay, but you still have to have a section on every single department in the government. And so this wouldn't get anything done. I also noticed that whereas the primary push of the Charter Commission election was about term limits, Dr. Stanley's input is mute on that. It says nothing about it. And so it's just so incomplete that it would be a great embarrassment if we actually put something like this before the people or try to get it on the ballot, because the state will let you put it on the ballot, but then even after it's voted on, I'm not sure if they'll let you put it into place if it doesn't meet all the requirements of a charter.
May I speak again?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Meade, we spent, I don't know, 10, 12 months talking about all the other aspects of the county government, which should be in print. Can we not just add that to what we have?
Well, Dr. Stanley, were you someplace where you were able to see my input?
Can you not hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, did you see the input I made for this meeting?
Did I do what?
Okay, just in case people on this meeting didn't read what I sent in, here's kind of what
the draft. I have read your draft, which is okay.
There we go. Let me find it.
But what I'm saying is, I would hope that Attorney Yeager already has the information on all those meetings we had on the various departments and how they work, which would be most of the remainder of the charter, I would think.
But there's things other than that. Like in my input, I said the charter must address each and every office in county government. It also it has to address how changes are made to the charter, the maintenance of the Charter Commission, the provisions for passing ordinances, which he discussed we wanted to have included. Handling of referendums has to be included. Amongst those offices would be the Law Director's Office that I think most everybody wants it to stay in accordance with the Private Act we already have in place. Term limits needs to be specifically addressed, regardless of how we go on it. It needs to be addressed. There's just a lot of things that are required. And so this needs to be a 25 or 30 page document, not a 1-page document.
Yes, sir. Well, what I was suggesting is we could add that to the 25 or 30 page document that should already be present about the present private acts government that we already have, and then we would have the entire thing.
I agree with what Steve Meade is saying.
I'd like to, can I comment?
Chairman.
Yeah, based
Chairman,
on,
you're muted yourself.
muted.
What am I gonna have to do? Just get on and mute mine?
No, you can talk, he hears you, everybody hears that.
Chairman, there you are.
I got it now. I don't know what
Okay.
happened. I sent an email earlier this afternoon, had Annette on a draft proposal for, once a charter's passed, on amending the charter to be a part of it. And I would hope did everyone get that email?
Yes.
And once we adopt the charter, or once we have what we want in the charter as far as changes, whatnot, I would like that to be, well, I guess the thing I need to do at this point is to pass the gavel to Dr. Smallridge so I can make a motion.
Okay, do you have a motion, Commissioner, Chairman?
I do.
Okay.
And that's why I was asking if everyone got the email this afternoon. If not, just give me a minute to find it in my. It says basically what I did, or what was sent out in the agenda. And the one thing that changed I said something about the sorry to be so disorganized, but I had it right in front of me on the agenda. What I sent out to everyone and was part of the agenda was any amendment or change would pass county commission by 2/3 majority vote on 2 separate readings and passed by a majority of voters at the next election of the governor, but it would be at the next general election, and can only be amended once in a 6-year period. I have that changed as far as the governor's election goes. It is that once the charter, if adopted, it couldn't be amended until 6 years. And then that amendment would have to pass the charter commission and go to county commission and pass by 2/3 majority on 2 separate readings, then go to the referendum of the people and be passed there to take effect. But I sent a draft copy to everyone. I won't attempt to read the 2 pages, but I would hope you would look at it. But that's basically what it says. So when the charter's adopted, that's my proposal, and I present that as a motion to be passed. Yes, Commissioner Meade. Oh, Dr.
Yes,
Smallridge.
yes, do we have a second for that motion?
I will second that motion.
Okay,
I would like to comment though, this is just an idea of why it's so important to have the charter that we put out to the people initially for approval be complete. It needs to include this kind of things in a whole bunch of different areas. Because if you can't change it for 6 years, you certainly want to have something that's pretty complete and final, and that the people will vote on. I think though that in some of the other places, something we might consider is that it be limited to every 6 years, but it would be by referendum to go ahead and make the change, or this voting process. I would support either one. I kind of like this one. I like the way this is written. I think this is good control. It gives ample time for change. But just like our founding fathers and our Constitution, they made it difficult to change our form of government, and I think that's good. So I'm in support of this amendment to the charter that was submitted and this is proposed. I'm in favor of something very similar to this or like this to be part of our charter.
We have further additional discussion on this motion. Okay, I'd like to ask, this is a motion. Would this still be subject to approval by the Charter Commission when we finally adopt the charter?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, are we saying that we are be a charter form of government?
I think we have voted, have we not, in the past that we would go ahead with a recommendation for a charter commission, that we had no choice in that matter?
That's right.
Okay, so
we
no
are
matter-
in the process of writing a charter.
Okay, so no matter what we put on there, if it was voted down in the public, then would we be a charter form of government if this was voted down?
No.
The people have the final say.
Could I,
Okay,
Jay?
so,
Yeager, do you have any input on that?
Yes, sir. What we're doing now is trying to get an abstract version, get all the requirements of a charter together, pass each one individually, and then when we put it all together, I want a final vote by the Charter Commission to approve it as written. So we know that we may pass something now that it may not fit in the very end. So yes, as to your question, will there be another vote on it? Yes, the final vote will take on the entire contents of the charter, and you'll look at each provision as it interplays with the other provisions, but we'll address each of the requirements that are in the Tennessee Code that have to be there. And of course, there'll be another vote on the entire contents of the charter at some point down the road. This is just one section we're trying to knock out, and we'll move on to the next one and have it ready for the next meeting, and so on and so on. Does that answer your question, Dr. Smallridge?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Jay. Okay, further discussion on this motion. It's been moved and seconded. Okay, can we call the roll? Annette?
Okay. Stonecipher,
Aye.
Smallridge,
Aye.
Alderson,
Aye.
Stanley,
Aye.
Emmert,
aye.
Isbell,
Aye.
White,
No.
Mead.
Yes.
7 yes and 1 no.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass the gavel back to our chairman.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Smallwood. The next proposal came from Steve Mead, Commissioner Mead.
Steve, you're muted, yeah, thank you.
Just doesn't work the same with the mute button. I'm trying to help keep the noise down. I gave this all to you guys in writing, and I don't know if I need to go through all of it, but there's a whole bunch of things that have to be included in a charter. Like I said previously, the other two counties in Tennessee that have a charter form of government, their charters are like 30, 35 pages long, and that's tiny print. And so there's a lot that has to be in there. And so we have to cover all these things. So we have to cover the maintenance of the Charter Commission, how we're going to do that, because it's part of what we just approved. Provisions for passing ordinance that we all talked about. We need to get that in there, and that we haven't even looked at the wording of that yet that I know of. The term limit thing. I made a very clear statement that in my discussions at a statewide level, the places that have done term limits, which is allowed only in charter form of government, and there's only 2 of those, they've had disastrous results. And Charlie Curtis, the executive director of the Tennessee County Commission Association, has pointed out that we have ample turnover in city and county government across the state. In term limits would really, anything less than 12 to 16 years would put us in a situation where we just don't have enough people. We routinely have people run for office that don't even have an opposition in a lot of places across the state. We had that happen a number of times here in Anderson County. We have a big turnover. And so I'm against any kind of thing like 2-term term limits like they were talking about during the Charter Commission vote, just to have a Charter Commission. They thought it was to guarantee a charter. It was just to have a Charter Commission. And so all that needs to be done. I would also like all of you to read the article by Jack Mitchell on the reasons for the Charter Commission petition. To give you, if you haven't read that, you need that to get the proper background for where we actually are. But we've committed that we're going to write some kind of charter. And when I ran, I said we want to have a charter that is for the betterment of the people of Anderson County, and not something designed to give more power to a small group. And so we have to look at this with a fine-tooth comb and discuss each one of these sections before we can really get a timeline that we can move ahead.
So at this time, Commissioner Mead, are you making any proposals to be voted on?
Well, I seconded the one that we just looked at.
Yes.
And I think those controls on how often the government has changed in the process for doing that, I think that's a very sound way to approach it.
Okay.
Chairman, may I speak?
Yes.
Chairman, may I speak? I just got a comment more than anything. I have got an individual that lives in my district, but probably a mile from my house, that works in the Knox County government. And she tells me if Anderson County went to a charter form of government, it'd be the most disastrous thing that Anderson County ever did. And she works in it, and she is hands-on on it. And she said it's been the most horrific thing that's ever happened to their government over in Knox County. So I'm still to the point. I ran not to change our government. I read 2 things a long time ago when I did my research, and they stuck out in my mind more than anything. One of them stated, frequent changes in the charter may cause instability in local government. The second thing says home rule allows local political and interest groups increased freedom from state supervision and interference. So I just, if there are no changes requested, and all we're doing is putting on the ballot that we're going to stay the same from what I read a lot of this from what I read, not including with what Commissioner Mead is stating, because if we were going to do one, I agree with Commissioner Mead. But if we're going to put on it that we're not going to make any changes, then all we're doing is open Pandora's box to create a charter government so anybody and everybody can come in basically and put something on the agenda, and then we're going to bring it up and vote on it. So I think the county commission does a great job of what they do. I've been there. I know what they go through, and they do a wonderful job. So I do not see why we have to have two commissioners fighting each other, and we hope we wouldn't be fighting each other. But if a charter form of government and our commissioners, if the charter commission agrees on something and county commission doesn't agree on it, then now we're bickering back and forth. Now we've got our government really in a turmoil. So that's just my 2 cents. And thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak.
But I don't think you're going to get a lot of debate on what you said, but we're at the point where we're going to present a charter for the voters to vote on. That's the law, and we're going to abide by it. So I guess my point is that if we got any proposals for changes, we need to bring them forward, and let's get on with the business. If not, we need to submit the present form of government as it is, as a charter. I'll be quiet. Commissioner Mead.
Well, I don't think we can do that because we have to put a charter form of government for the people to vote on. And if the people vote on that government, it's going to have those things that are required for a charter government. I would prefer staying with the government system we have, but we don't have that as an option. I would propose, though, and I'll make a motion that one of the things in this proposed charter include the fact that the law director's office be run in accordance with the current private act in the same way that it's been done in the past, because that's something that's not really, that's something that we already have a private act, and it's different than other parts of the country. I mean, other parts of the state. And so the way we run our law director's office is unique and by the private act. And I would recommend that the charter government proposal include the fact that the law director's office will continue to be operated in accordance with the private act. And that for that to be changed, it would take supermajority of our county commission approval by the legislature and the governor. And then it comes back to us again for a 2/3 majority vote before it goes into effect. But in this charter thing, we can just say that's how we're going to do it in accordance with the current private act for the law director's office. I wish I could tell you what the private act number is. I expect the law director can tell us.
May I speak a minute, David Stanley?
Well, let's see if is that a motion? Hold on a minute, David. Is that a motion,
Yes.
Commissioner Mead?
Yes.
Do I hear a second to his motion?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jay. You don't need a motion on that. That's a private act, and the charter laws specifically say private acts stay in place until changed. So that does not need to be included. That private act that Commissioner Mead is referring to is already been passed by the General Assembly. It's gone through that process. So there's no need to incorporate that in the charter at all. It's there, and the process for repealing that is specific to a private act. It would not be controlled by the charter form of government. It's controlled by that private act that's in place. But I'm sorry to interrupt, but that doesn't need to be included because the charter laws already address private acts, and it states that they stand as they are when enacted, even if we went to a charter form of government. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, David Stanley. And I agree with Jay on that. And what we were basically proposing was that we keep exactly the same private act government we have, except to add that one page or two or whatever we need to add to make it a charter that we can submit for vote, public vote. And if you'll recall, on the first meeting back in December of 2016, I guess it was, Commissioner Meade recommended, and it was passed that Mr. Yeager be our attorney until such time as there might be need for an attorney that has more experience and knowledge, especially in charter government, to help us complete the charter business. And also there was concern about possibly a conflict of interest, which Attorney Yeager has already admitted that he does have a conflict of interest at this point. So I think in order to go ahead and complete this, we need to get at least another attorney to assist us to complete it.
Mr. Chairman, to speak on that issue, we adopted last meeting a proposal that said, we were going to have outside counsel review it. I still stand by that. I want outside counsel. I want to satisfy Dr. Stanley's concern. And I've got an individual that's willing to do this. We'll have to pay him. He is familiar with the charter form of government. And I would feel a lot better if we had outside counsel. We've already passed that motion at last meeting that after we get this thing put together, we'll send it to outside counsel for review and edits. That's a motion that's already been approved.
Do we know how much something like that would cost?
I will get the hourly billing amount and bring it back to you. But again, you're dealing with a very, very small group of attorneys that have experience in charter form of government. And I want somebody that's operated within a charter to take a look at this. You can't just give it to a government lawyer. I want somebody specifically that's dealt with charter forms of government. And I applaud Dr. Stanley for asking for that. But we'll just go ahead and move forward and do what we can. And at some point, we've already approved that we will send it to outside counsel and let them take a look at it and make sure that we've done everything in accordance with the laws.
This is not the same ones that wrote the Knox County Charter, is it?
No, sir. It's not the same ones that wrote the Knox County Charter.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mark.
I've got a question, and it's just like including this stuff. I've never understood the fact that people's wanting term limits because each of us have run, and every 4 years you have a term limit that the public can vote you one way or the other. But my actual question is to the law directors is, Jay, can you establish a 30-page document and then do amendments from that so everybody knows what is actually being said on all the offices and stuff? I think that would give us a better view as to what might need to be amended to anything or a different discussion. But if we had that 30, 35 page or even a 20-page document to go by and then change from that.
I agree with you, Commissioner Alderson. I think the best way to do this and try to stay within our timeline, try to satisfy Dr. Stanley and get this done as expeditiously as possible is just go ahead and draft. I've already heard we want to keep our government basically the same, but we want to comply with the charter laws. We'll go ahead and take a stab at putting something together and just bring it back and for your review and edits. I think that's a faster process than several meetings that were at the pace we're going at, bringing forward. I wanted this meeting to hear what proposals the charter commissioners had, But I think the best route to go is just to start putting pen to paper on this issue and bringing you back something that contains all the requirements of the charter laws. Let you take a look at it. I'm sure there's things that you will not like, some things you will like. We'll sift through those and move forward and get it whittled down to where there's something that the majority of you agree on is something we want to put to the voters. But I think that's going to be a faster process at this point instead of piecemealing it with numerous meetings. We do have it. No, I think that's everybody is in agreement. I believe that we just need to get something, a working copy in front of you that you can start reviewing and saying, yes, I like that, but I don't like this, and move forward that way. That's the fastest way to handle this.
Go with it.
But I do want to tell you this. Of course, writing this charter is a big job. I'm addressing the budget committee on Thursday, trying to get some help in my office. We're overwhelmed as it stands right now. It's just myself and two ladies in here. There's a lot of work all the time. So hopefully when the new budget year starts, I'm losing my paralegal, Barbara. She's retiring after, good Lord, I don't know how long. She worked for David Stewart for years, and then she's worked for me since 2006, off and on. I had to bring her out of retirement when we lost our previous paralegal. But it's time for her to retire, and she's still agreed to train a new person. So we're not asking for another person in this office. We're still going to remain at 3. But again, once this person gets online, I'll be able to devote more time to the charter. But the way I see it right now is just to go ahead and start developing a charter, bring it back to you guys and let you take a look at it, and we'll sift through it and closely vet it. And then when we finally get to something, we'll take a vote on it and move forward with submitting that to the voters. But right after that, we'll take it to outside counsel, have them make recommendations. We'll come back. You'll approve what outside counsel recommends, and then we'll send it to the election commission. But I think that's the most expedient way of handling this at this point. And I think you'll have a better understanding. You all got copies of the charter statutes and what's required, but I think the best thing for me to do is to go ahead and cover each and every component that has to be in there by law and go through all the departments. They need to be reestablished. And then we'll come back and work with it. And again, have a working copy that you guys can eliminate, delete, edit, whatever you want to do. And but that's the way I'd like to proceed. If that's what you want to do, make a motion and get that approved, and I'll start to work on it as soon as I have free time. It'll probably be in the evenings. Daytime is extremely busy here, so I'll just start chopping away on it at night.
Mr. Chairman.
Good. Yes, sir.
Make that as a motion for Jay to go ahead and give a simple ballot to that.
I second that motion.
Motion made and second. I have a question for Jay. When you you don't have to have a complete charter, a completed charter to bring it back to us. It could be in pieces.
Yes, sir. But I think the best thing to do is to start working on it. And even at the next meeting, I'll bring you several pieces. You can start working on those, and we'll try to get it put together as quickly as I possibly can. But please understand, I've got other duties that are imperative I get done for this county government. But I promise I'll be working on it at night, and we'll move as fast as possible.
That answers my question.
And again, we've signed an agreed order with the court that we're going to move without any unnecessary delays on this or unreasonable delays. And I want to comply with that order. That's very important. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Commissioner Meade.
Yes, one of the things I want to point out is that because there's 2 other counties that have gone ahead and had charter forms of government for a while, we now know where the problems are, and we can leave those out of our charter. And so I think we have the advantage of that little bit of motion. I'll also point out that other counties have taken charters to the voters, and none of them have passed, other than Knox County and Shelby County, and that's been a long time ago. And now we know where the problems are. And so we can avoid those in our charter, because I don't think there's very much that has to go in a charter that creates a problem. It's we put the other counties that have done this have put in things that they did at their election, and at their choice. And those are the ones that have caused problems. We now have the benefit of being able to look back on what's caused them problems and what didn't. And so I think Jay could do a good job putting this together for us. So we probably should go to a vote as soon as everybody else is ready.
There's no other discussion. Annette, will you please call the roll for a vote?
Stonecipher,
Aye.
Smallridge,
Yes.
Alderson,
Aye.
Stanley,
Aye.
Emmert,
Aye.
Isbell, Jerry White, Mead.
Yes. Aye.
Tate,
Mr. Chairman, this is Jay again. Just one last thing. I want to make sure I understand this correctly. And again, you'll have a chance to review it, but I'm to write this charter consistent with our current form of government in Anderson County, with the additions of what's required in a charter mandated by Tennessee law. But that's the way I understand this chore, is to write it consistent with our current form of government. That's the private act that was passed in the early 1800s, and we'll move forward in that direction. Is that correct?
That's correct, but we have one other item we're going to bring up that's on the agenda.
Okay.
And that's Jerry White. You made a proposal for staggered terms of county commissioners.
Yes, sir.
Are you submitting that?
Mr. Chairman, I was asked to bring that before the Charter Commission. I'm not particularly for that staggered term. I believe that the people speaks every 4 years about our commissioners, and I think for the record, we have several turnovers every election. I promised that person that I would bring this up and for discussion, but I think that the people, the voters, do a good job of eliminating commissioners that don't do the job. So sometimes commissioners, just resign. So I think we have a pretty good turnover. So I just brought that up for discussion, not as I wouldn't make that a motion at all. I just wanted to get everybody's feelings on that, if you would permit me to. Thank you.
Okay, Jerry, I'd like to point out something. We talked about this earlier on. And what needs to happen, and it's going to happen soon because the 10 years is about up, and you'll go through a redistricting process. And when that happens, the commission could decide to do this without a charter, I think. And they could have, where you got 2 seats, you could have seat A and seat B, and they would decide which one would run for a 2-year term and which one would be a 4-year term in each district, and that would settle the issue. Now, that's just my opinion, so you might want to check that out.
That satisfies my request, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Meade, you had your...
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is I think we had looked at this once before, and under our normal constitutional form of government, for some reason there was an obstacle to doing that. And my question to the law director, would that kind of a thing be allowed under a charter form of government?
Yes, sir, I believe it is. Again, the state statute, again, going back, that we're going to try to propose something that's consistent with our current form of government. And so that would be controlled by TCA. Says those will be 4-year terms. And as long as they're 4-year terms, I think we're okay. That first one is the one that has a little bit of hiccups, because that first one of those seats, A or B, is going to be running for a 2-year term. But I believe we went through this with the school board years ago. I believe that was 01 or 02. And we looked at it, and I believe that we can do that. And of course, there's a little bit more flexibility in the charter laws, but I do believe it's probably possible. But I'll be glad to look at that for Commissioner White if he so desires.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there any old business? Any new business? All right, hearing no other business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion made to adjourn.
Second it.
No other business. This meeting's adjourned.